Right.
I really liked this chapter in Tunnel about fantasy because when I was little, I never read fantasy ever.
Really?
And so, yeah. Well, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
That was like it. Yeah. So I really liked hearing about it. And
I liked really reading it mostly because, like, I feel like the information wasn't new, but, like, I've never put it in a category before.
Yeah,
It was like, there's actual categories for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really cool to actually know what the specific ones were.
Yeah, and, like, what the structure of fantasy is and what it's, like, built off of.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
I was surprised to see some of these, like, books in here, though, that I didn't really consider fantasy, like, Tuck Everlasting. I don't know why I didn't think that was fantasy, but I just never put it together.
Mm-hmm.
And then under science fiction, The Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I guess it makes sense. But
Yeah, I get those two categories mixed up because sometimes when I think science fiction, I think, like, the book that we read, what was it called? Where the little boy, like, ages and...
A Man in the Mirror?
Yeah, The Man in the Mirror. So, with that one, I was like, I don't know, like, is this really fantasy or is this science fiction? Because, like, to me,
like
fantasy... Yeah, Stranger Than Earthly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I was like, I don't really know, like, sometimes, which is which, because they're, like, so similar, and science fiction and fantasy kind of go hand in hand, so.
I just called everything fantasy. But isn't aging quickly, that's a real thing.
But not, like, overnight. Like,
Yeah, I think so.
Like-
Have you seen the movie with Robin Williams and he just, like,
uh-huh.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The one where he has all those friends and they have a tree house.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I forget what that's called.
I don't remember.
Have you guys seen that one?
no.
Like, he ages literally overnight?
Yeah, so, well, not overnight, but over time, just at a very fast pace. So then Robin Williams is like this grown man,
Mm-hmm.
but he's playing a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it just made me think of that. So I didn't know if it was like really science fiction or fantasy.
Yeah, I think
But I
that
guess the
there...
overnight thing.
I've heard of, like, conditions where you do age faster physically than other people, like, you appear to be older than you are, but I've never heard of, like, overnight it happening, like, in such a drastic way, where first you look like a 6-year-old or whatever it is, and then next day you look like you're 85 or something, you know, so.
I really liked how Joy talked about how we treat older people. Because I don't think I would have, like, gotten that by just reading it on my own, but I really like that she pointed that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of bothered me, too, a little bit that he was, like, so... I mean, obviously he's gonna be freaked out if he, like, his entire appearance changes overnight, but, like, I don't know. There's, like... I feel like it's always bad to portray being old as, like, a negative thing, because I have older relatives who are, like, very happy with where they are in their life, and I guess it's because, like, they've had all of the experiences that come with age and everything, and, like, the little boy obviously didn't have that, but also there's, like, I think a certain respect for older people in other cultures that we don't necessarily have as much, which is really frustrating because, like, having older relatives, like, I have a grandma who's 102, and, like, just, like, being around them a lot in church and, like, in my family, I just feel like I was taught how to be respectful to older people, but I also hear kids that say, like, really insensitive things, and it's just like, how do I talk to them about this? Like... I don't know.
Or have you guys seen that Geico commercial lately? That's like, this is so random, but it's not random. Okay, anyway. So it's like this Geico commercial, and this guy is like, I'm going to tell you 2 facts. Number 1, you can save a lot of money by switching to Geico. And number 2, don't ever tell your mother-in-law that she can stay as long as she wants. And like,
Ooh.
and there's like this woman, and she's like, pay the taxi man or whatever. And anyway, that just reminded me about how different, like, our society is when it comes to, like, allowing or inviting, like, older people to, like, live with us and stuff, or older relatives to live with us. How, like, that's so not what happens in our society, and, like, it's kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
But, like, in other societies, it's just, like, fun.
Yeah. Like, I feel like in our Asian American Cultural Studies class, we talk about, like, multi-generational families living together in one home, and how there's an expectation that you're going to take care of your parents when they're old. You're not going to, like, ship them off to a home. I think Joy mentioned that in the video. And I just think that's, like, such a strange thing for us to think about in an individualist society, where we're just kind of like, every man for himself, or every woman for himself, and, like, how do you help kids to understand that that's, like, a normal thing, you know, and that it's okay to, I mean, not everyone has grandparents and everything, but, like, how do you help little kids to get along with older people and be respectful of them when they're not exposed to them all the time?
That's what I liked about this book. It wasn't explicitly, like, it didn't explicitly talk about ageism, but it showed it from the perspective of a little boy who was going through these changes. So I thought that was really interesting. And when she mentioned ageism, I, like, felt kind of guilty, because I don't disrespect my elders, but I often talk about how, like, I never want to get old, or, like, I want to stay young forever, and just that in itself is kind of perpetuating that stereotype and stuff. But
when I was in high school, my grandma was really sick, and luckily she lived in our same neighborhood. She lived, like, 4 houses down from us, but we had a baby shower for one of my cousins, and my grandma was at our house, and she had a really small stroke during the baby shower.
Oh my gosh.
And we ended up, like, calling, like, the ambulance and stuff, and everything was fine. She was okay, but she, like, stayed the night at our house that night.
Yeah.
And my grandma, or both my grandparents on that side, like, smoked heavily, like, and so my concern as, like, a high schooler at the time was, like, is grandma gonna smoke in our house, like, whatever, all this stuff. And then in the middle of the night, she woke up and, like, she was in the guest bedroom, and she, like, started smoking. And I was, like, all pissed off about it, because I was in high school, and my house smelled like cigarettes and all this stuff, and I, like, woke up for school in the morning and, like, left. And when I got back, my grandma was gone, and she was back at her house. And I, like, instantly felt, like, guilt. Like, did she feel like I didn't want her here because she was smoking? Like, should I have been more, like, accepting of her and, like, I don't know, like, taking advantage of, like, her being here in the room next to me? I don't know. It was just weird. But we, like, towards the end of my grandma's life, like, we talked as a family about her, like, moving in with us and stuff, and we asked her if she wanted to. She was like, no. But anyway, it would have been such a different dynamic if she would have moved in. And I wonder, like, how I would have handled that as a high schooler.
In my family, my mom talks a lot about how I'm supposed to take care of her and live with her. She thinks I'm moving in with her, like, after graduating. But yeah, that's really important. And my grandparents usually, they all live on their own right now, but the kids are constantly like, when are you gonna live with us, blah blah blah. And my aunt just moved into a new house, and she made it a point to have, like, a room on the floor, on the first floor, so she didn't have to go down any stairs and stuff. And just, I didn't realize that they thought so far ahead in the future, because I mean, my grandma's probably not going to live with them for a while, but it just shows how in my culture that is just such a huge thing.
Such a natural thing.
Yeah.
To expect.
Yeah.
I feel like in my family, like, I never grew up, like, being around people who are old. Like, I didn't know any of my grandparents, and, like, I don't know, it just wasn't around people. But, I feel like just my mom kind of, like, really enforced the idea that you have to be respectful to everyone.
Yeah.
And so, like, even now, I don't think I'm around old people, like, a lot. But I think just being reinforced that, like, everyone is a person, you have to be respectful of them no matter what. Just, like, I don't think I'm disrespectful of old people. But, I mean, yeah, there is that thing of, like, what do you do when kids aren't exposed to them?
Because it's kind of like, it's similar to how kids react to people with disabilities because they don't see, like, elderly people every day, so they might be like, oh, that person's so old, or say something like that and not realize that it's insensitive. Or, like, I don't know, calling attention to someone's age isn't necessarily something we do.
Right.
So.
I volunteer in a first grade classroom, and this just popped into my head. And I can't believe I didn't recognize this when it happened, but on the, like, 100th day of school, they had a celebration, and I wasn't there specifically on that day, but I was there, like, on the days leading up to it, and they had this art project that was like, when I'm 100 years old, this is what I'll do, this is what I'll look like, this is what I'll eat, this is what I'll say, and they, like, brainstormed things, and then they had to, like, write their own thing and, like, draw themselves as, like, an old person, and
oh my goodness.
It was, like, kind of comical, but at the same time, like, the things that they were brainstorming, I was like, that is so disrespectful. Like, I'll, like, drive badly and, like, eat prunes and
oh my gosh,
all of this stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was, like, reading them and, like, thinking it was funny, but now that I look back at that was so disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I didn't notice that before.
Because those are, like, stereotypes about old people. Yeah.
Did they brainstorm those out loud or, like, on paper?
No, like, as a class, they brainstormed.
Did, like,
oh my gosh.
The teacher, like, led the discussion.
And she wasn't.
She didn't address that?
No.
Okay.
I, like, can't believe I didn't think about this sooner. That's so weird.
Maybe she was trying not to laugh.
Like, you know, pick your battles, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, man.
At the Child Development Center, these two girls were playing, and they had, like, these sticks that they were using as crutches, and I was like, what are you guys playing? And they're like, we're old ladies who broke our knees.
Oh, no.
It was so bad. And then, it was funny at the time. And then I'm doing LED 481, working on reading and writing in a 4th grade classroom. And then I taught a lesson on empathy and, like, writing a diary entry, trying to be that character. And this girl was like, it was about the flood, the Mosses flood in Boston, and how it, like, crashed through a neighborhood. And this girl was like, well, all of my neighbors are old, so I wouldn't really care.
Oh, that's not okay.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yikes. Yeah. It's really sad how, like, we lose, like, in our society, we think that, like, life loses value as you get older because of the things that, like, you're not able to do anymore. But, I don't know, having grown up around a lot of elderly people, I realized that, like, part of what's great about getting old is being able to, like, share what you've learned over your many years of living with your children and your grandchildren, and being able to talk about that. Like, my great-grandma was born in 1913. That's insane. Like, she lived through everything. And so I just think it's great to look at what elderly people can offer society, you know, because, like, people say things like, oh, well, they're on Medicare, so they're, like, mooching off of the government, and it's like, no, those people paid into Medicare their entire life.
Yeah.
Like,
I have a question, and this might be a weird question, but can ageism go both ways? Like, can you be discriminatory against someone who's young?
I don't know if it's called the same thing.
Yeah, it's still ageism. I think, honestly, I thought about that too before. Like, when my relatives say, "Oh, you think you know everything because you're in college," and it's like, seriously, like you're gonna discount everything I just said just because of my age and where I am in my education? Like, yes, I'm in college. That's the point. Like, I'm learning new things, and I'm like trying to educate you, and you're not listening to me just because I'm like not 40 years old.
Yeah.
Or what I was thinking in particular was like not giving somebody a job because they don't have enough experience, but they've literally just gotten out of college.
Yeah.
Isn't that the worst?
Yeah, it's so bad. It's so frustrating because it's like, what am I supposed to do? I don't have experience. How am I supposed to get experience if nobody's gonna give me a job?
Yeah.
I feel like I've had a similar conversation with that my first quarter of like college, like in general, and it was like this program for like students who didn't finish high school, and so a lot of the students were talking about how they feel like they were like people were using ageism against them, like, oh my gosh, you're just like this kid straight out of high school, or like not even finishing high school. Like, you don't know anything, and like just kind of like being really discriminatory towards them just because how young they were. And so I feel like you can like be the reverse. Like, it's not just like, oh my gosh, they're so old, so like it's, you know, but like it can go in reverse. Like, I know everything because I'm older. Like, you know nothing because you're so much younger. Like, I have all this experience.
Yeah. It's a very different dynamic. That's what I wrote about in my thing too, for my mirror for this book. Just how people don't take you seriously, or like you also have to. I feel like I have to act differently if I walk into a room of adults and I'm the only one. Like, change your whole persona and the things you talk about, the way you carry yourself, and everything.
Yeah,
It's true.
could that be a mini question?
Yeah.
Time is it?
17:28.
Because I don't really know for sure if it totally is, because our society loves talk, or like being young is like being beautiful in our society. So I don't really know.
So, because we think of elderly people in a sense as an oppressed culture because of the way that we talk about them in society and the way that we value them in, well, I should say American society, does that make it, like, is that the only kind of ageism there is because of that fact? But I feel like it can also go for children, because I know a lot of people that don't take children seriously, and obviously there are times when, like, kids are gonna be kids, and they're goofy, and they say, like, they make up things and they say silly things, but at the same time, like, if you really listen to what kids say, they have a lot of wisdom, and I think a lot of people discount that because they are children, so I feel like in that sense, it could be, you know, because they don't have that power that adults do. Speaking of elderly people, I know, did you both read the other book? Okay, so in City of the Beast, this boy who's like high school aged, I think, goes into, like, his mom has cancer, and so he's staying with his grandma for a while, but she's going on this trip to the Amazon, so he basically gets dragged along, and he ends up like having this like incredible adventure with her. But I think it's interesting to see the dynamic between him as like a young male and his grandma, who's just like this woman that has this very like gruff exterior, and she doesn't show any affection or give him praise or do things like that, which I kind of reacted to because I have never experienced that with members of my family. Like, they've always been very kind and sweet and thoughtful, and they don't say like things that would be like mean or, you know, in a tone that made me feel bad, unless like obviously as a child when you do something that you're not supposed to do, then you're gonna get a talking to. But
and especially grandparents. Grandparents
Yeah.
are usually like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you."
yeah, they're the ones that like spoil you and tell you you're the most beautiful person in the world. You're like, Grandma, no, it's okay. I know I'm not. Like, but
You're probably the smartest one.
yeah,
at your school.
yeah, it's like no.
You can think
But
about
thank
that.
you. Yeah, exactly. So like I always think of grandparents in this like light of them being kind of the ones that like spoil the kids and like get to do all the fun things to get back at their kids, like give them really their grandkids like really loud toys. That's what my grandparents did. They were like, this is payback time. So yeah, it was just a really interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah, this book was super interesting. My mirror in this book was my dad, when I was in 9th grade, had a heart attack, and it was
Oh my gosh.
2 of his arteries were blocked, and his aortic artery was blocked, 99% blocked.
Oh my gosh.
And he had to go into emergency surgery. I actually wrote my personal narrative on this.
Wow.
But he had to go into emergency surgery, and my brother and I like didn't get to like see him before he went into surgery. And we didn't know if he was like gonna like make it out of surgery. They called the blockage the widowmaker. Like that's how intense it was. And but he made it out. But anyway, so my window was like Alex didn't know if his mom was gonna be okay, and so I don't know. Like I felt for him through the whole book. Like that's why I kept reading, because I was like the whole trip, like he was thinking about his mom and all this stuff. Like what can I do for my mom and stuff. And anyway, so that's how I felt when I was reading it.
I felt like I didn't get a lot of closure as well, because he
I
never
know.
goes home. Like you never hear the part of it where he goes home and like sees his mom, and like a part of this like adventure that he goes on is he finds basically the fountain of youth, but it's like health water or something that like is healing, and so he gets that for his mom, and the shaman that he is like with in most of the story gives him like these leaves, and he's like, crush these into the water and like it'll make your mom better, but then he never goes home, so we don't get to see what happens with that.
His mom is okay.
And it's so frustrating. And I'm just like, do I have to read this entire series to get an answer? Yeah, apparently. It had the first chapter of the next book, and like the last part of the book, I was like, no!
You probably won't go home till like the 5th one.
Yeah. Seriously, though. Oh, man.
The author played on that really well.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I know with the House of the Scorpion, the one thing I really did like about it was they broke it up into his ages. And so it was like from birth to 6 years old, and then from like 7 to whatever, and all the way till he's like,
Oh,
where he
cool.
ends at 13. I don't remember how old he ends at. He ends at a certain age, but like that was one thing I really liked, was just seeing like the progression of him and like all those different things. But you know, the book, I feel like in certain parts it was stretched out really well. Like they just did an awesome job, and then other parts I was just like, I just want to skim it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And I was actually really disappointed with the ending of the book.
Really?
I felt like there was this big chunk of just like this, just kept reading and reading and reading, and then finally when you get to the part that you want it to happen, it was just like a chapter that went by like so fast,
Oh.
and I felt like it was just super rushed, and I don't know, I felt like
After
there was,
everything was just dragged.
yeah, I felt like there was just this big long like, okay, come with me, I'm taking you on this journey, and then just there.
There's
Yeah.
the ending.
Yeah.
What was it about?
So, oh, I forgot you guys didn't read it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's about, and correct me if
Yeah.
I say anything wrong. It's about this little boy, except he's a clone of this one guy, and so apparently making clones now is normal. It seems to be normal, I guess.
Yeah, so
It's not much, yeah.
there's a lot going on, and for me it was really, really interesting, but honestly I was so busy this week that I was really distracted when I was reading it, so I felt like I missed a lot of important parts that I had to piece together like throughout. But so it takes place between like Mexico and America, and the leader turns all of like the people trying to cross over, he puts chips in them, and they like are programmed to do everything he says, or they can't do more than like simple tasks. So those are all of the farmers, and then he makes a clone of himself because he doesn't want to die, or has a really bad fear of getting older. So he wants to use the clone's organs and stuff. So then the boy is going through all of the changes as he finds out the truth about himself. Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was like really cool, or I guess I don't know. In the very first chapter, and I didn't make the connection until I reread the first chapter, but they were making like all of these clones, and then one of the ladies who said, "Don't touch that one. All of the Mateo, or whatever his name is, stay as they are." And so all the other clones that are made become like they like kill their brains basically. But all of these particular ones from the big leader, he lets them grow up normal and like a normal boy. And so, well, yeah, like he has emotions and everything. He's not like stupid.
Weird.
Yeah, and so it was just very interesting to see how like he didn't know he was a clone until like it was revealed to him, and then it was just interesting to see like his life now that he knows he's a clone.
Yeah, but also, in addition to that, I talked a lot about like power struggles between people and like the power of choice and free will and stuff, and how he was isolated for like the first 8 years, 7 years of his life. So it was interesting to me to see like science fiction, and then how undocumented citizens live and how they're treated and stuff. Because I mean, these people, they were made to be farmers with chips in their heads, so that just says a lot about like how this leader valued people.
Yeah. And it says something about our society too, and how we treat immigrants.
Yeah. One thing I also thought was interesting though is like the place where like they lived. It was like supposed to be this really horrid place where like this one guy like controls everything. But I felt like it was interesting because when he crossed the border, to an extent, it was also like that.
Yeah.
They were still controlling people, and they were still kind of doing the same thing. I feel like to a lower extent, but it was just interesting to see like no matter where they went, it was the same.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
It kind of like how people come here to live like the American dream, but it's no better than where they came from.
Or can be worse in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. And my mirror to this book was so in the Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot like didn't want any educated people in the country, or like any creative people or artists or anything. And there's actually a documentary called something about rock and roll, and just how musicians had to hide their love of music and pretend to be people that they weren't, or they had to like undermine their intelligence. And that's what I thought of with all the chips and everything, and how they just had to go into agriculture. So it was really eye-opening to read from this perspective and connect that to my own family's experience.
that's interesting. My mirror for this was kind of with Matt. That was like the clone. His last emotion. When he went across the border, like, there was this one guy, I think his name, like, Tamlin, is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know how to say it.
Well, Tamlin, whatever. He was kind of like his bodyguard and caretaker, but he kind of grew up with him, so he saw him as, like, his dad figure. And so when he went across the border, like, he said, I'm never going to see you again. And so he kind of accepted it. But then at the end of the book, the people across the border was like, you have to go back and fix all this. And so he kind of had, like, this thing of, like, I get to see, like, my mom, which was Celia, who raised her. I get to see my mom, and I get to see Tamlin, who was, like, his dad, who's like, we can live together, I can fix this all. And then at the end of the book, you realize that everyone is dead. And, like, Celia's alive, and, like, a couple other people, but Tamlin, he died as well. And so there was just, like, this, like, he had this envision.
Yeah.
Like, he got his hopes up of, like, we get to be together. We get to do all this stuff. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And this disappointment. And I feel like that's kind of how sometimes I am. Like, I have to plan really far in ahead. Like, if something happens right away, I'm like, oh, okay, like, I don't know how to react to it. So I have to, like, really plan ahead and, like, think further. And then when something doesn't go the way I planned, it's just, like, it derails everything.
Yeah.
And so I kind of related to that emotion.
Oh, yeah.
And like finally feeling like you are getting the chance to make everything better.
I feel like that happens a lot as a student. Like, you have to pick up your life and, like, change everything. And, like, things happen in your classes and you have to, like, scramble to make everything right. And, yeah, it's just, I think being in your 20s is just kind of like that. Like, you're trying to piece your life together and everything falls apart and then you have to put it back together.
I don't know if you guys saw that video on Facebook that's, like, going around. It's, like, life in your 20s. And, okay, it's, like a soft, like, it kind of reminds me of, like, a bouncy house. But there's this thing, like, swinging around, and you have to, like, stand on it and, like, duck when it comes around.
Gosh. So
But
true.
every time you try and get back up, it's, like, coming back around again, and so it's, like, knocking this kid down every time. It's, like, coming around, he's, like, getting up and, like, going
Oh my
back.
gosh.
It's, like, life in your 20s. I was like, that's true.
So accurate. Hey, that's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Look at that transition into that subject. Yeah, that was interesting. I didn't think about, like, the metaphors that were in the book until I actually, like, wrote my post for this week, and how, like, built on those metaphors, like, the whole plot was and everything. And I don't know. It's just really interesting to make those connections and how much those metaphors relate to the theme and, like, the overall, like, value of what is being presented in the text.
Right.
I like how this book mentioned why metaphors are so important and how they help students make those wider connections. So I don't remember the example, but it was like, if you can state something plainly, but if you use a metaphor, it's just like, you're like, whoa, like, this matters more than I thought.
Right. So there were the people in the the people of the mist that lived in the Amazon, and Alex talked about how they could, like, camouflage into
The
woods basically, and so nobody could see them. They were, like, basically invisible. And to me, that was such a metaphor for American Indians when like, Europeans came to the United States, and I thought of it as like a metaphor, like, we didn't really see that this land was theirs, like that they were really here the whole time. Anyway.
Yeah, I thought it related back to crossing Bokchito, yes, thank you. And how the people, like, disappeared, like, walking slowly and, like, all of that, and it really reminded me of that. And I wondered if, again, it was, like, just metaphorical, or if it was literally, because this book had a lot of, like, magic stuff in it too. So I wasn't sure if it was, like, one or the other, or a little bit of both. And also they had, like, spirit animals, I guess you would call them, or they called them their totemic, like, animal or something like that. So
that part reminded me of Harry Potter. When
yeah. the animagus? Is that what they're no, the
What's it called? Do you know what I'm
Oh.
talking about? Where like Harry's mom is the or the deer.
Oh.
The doe. What's it called?
They're Patronus.
Patronus.
There we
Yes.
go. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
And oh yeah, that makes sense. But what's the thing? Oh, so it would say things like Alex was the jaguar. They would start
Yeah.
calling him Jaguar, and then Nadia was like eagle, and I was like, are these just like attributes that they're relating to animals, or like did they actually become these animals, or like do they have a psychic
Yeah.
connection with the animals? Like I was like, I don't really understand how this works.
I think they physically turned into those
Mhm.
animals. Like, because it was like during like a rite of passage type thing.
Yeah.
And Alex was like a jaguar all of a sudden, and I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What?
I know. Yeah.
That's why I feel like I didn't get these books when I was little, because I would always be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, there's a jaguar now? Like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Mhm.
But I think these books are really good for like students who
Mhm.
are more into that kind of thing.
Mhm.
One metaphor that I thought of was just Matt the clone and how he was made to replicate like this leader who thought he was perfect and above everyone, and how even though he was a clone of the leader, he symbolized kind of symbolized perfection just of El Patron, and how that didn't mean anything. He was treated even worse than he would have if he was a normal human. They treated him as an animal, basically, and there is this one scene. Oh, I don't remember what happened. Shoot.
Which one? Where he was left in the bedroom, or no?
With the cat food. Maybe this is a different book that I was reading.
Oh.
I don't know, but he was basically like treated as an animal. It was just horrible. And I kind of related that to utopian societies that we read about, and that was what the author of Lois Lowry talked about. And how like everyone was meant to be the same, and they all of like their intelligence was undermined, and that just leads to no good for anyone.
And nobody saw the cost of what living like they lived
So they didn't
was.
know.
Yeah, exactly. And did you guys read The Giver in elementary school?
No.
Really? Okay. So maybe it was just because I was in like the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Kids or whatever, but we kind of got away with reading everything. So we read like The Hobbit and a bunch of other stories that you probably wouldn't have read in a regular class or whatever. But we read The Giver, and I remember being extremely disturbed by the story because it was kind of like creepy in the way that they were all so similar, and like everything had to be perfect. And then when you find out like the cost of what living in that perfect society is, it's like really scary, and it makes me think of like people who want to ignore the fact that there is like racism and that people are being oppressed in society because they don't experience it. So instead they just want to ignore it and not like bring up the differences that we have between each other, or people who say they're colorblind and things like that, because you're ignoring the issue in order to like basically pacify the situation. And so I don't know, I just think of like how our society kind of
Or all lives matter.
yeah, exactly. How our society kind of like dismisses the actual issues that are going on in order to like keep the peace.
Yeah.
When really the only way we're gonna have peace is if we discuss those issues.
Yeah.
And if we help people to be more accepting and not just like ignore people's differences, but acknowledge them and appreciate them.
Until a couple quarters ago, I didn't even know why All Lives Matter was so bad,
Mhm.
or like I didn't realize it, and it's just crazy thinking about how subconsciously we do all of these things,
Mhm.
and we have no idea how they're affecting
Mhm.
the greater whole.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought of this really good metaphor because for the longest time I had like a hard time like finding the language to respond when people would say all
Yeah.
lives matter.
Yeah.
But something that's like really helped me is I talk about if you have like like a couple children and one child comes to you and says like, "Mom, I'm not feeling loved lately. I feel like you've been like spending more time with so and so, and I just like I don't feel loved by you." And then I would drop everything
Yeah.
and make sure that that child felt loved.
Yeah.
And maybe like take them out to lunch and like spend more time with them. And it's not because I don't love my other children, it's because that child has spoken up and said that they don't feel loved right
Yeah.
now. And so of course all of my children matter. I don't have children.
Metaphorical children, we're with you, we're with you.
All of my children would matter, but right then I would need to take care of that one more
Yeah.
because they weren't feeling loved.
And they have greater needs and they felt dismissed,
Mhm.
and the other child might not have those needs because those needs might be met in
Mhm.
one way or another. That's a really good metaphor for it,
Yeah.
actually. That's a really great way of thinking about it, because that's something that everyone can relate to.
Mhm.
Not everyone can relate to the systems of oppression that Black people go through and experience, like, the ramifications of every single day. You know, because if you're a white person like me, like, if I wasn't educated on this stuff, I would never know about it.
Because you don't see it.
Yeah, because I'm not affected by it.
Right.
But I think that's why the Black Lives Matter movement is so important, is because it brings up that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everyone is being treated the same, however much you want to tell yourself that,
Right,
it's
yeah.
not happening. And that's just the truth.
Yeah.
And so ignoring that isn't going to make anything better, or dismissing it and saying all lives matter isn't going to make anything better. Because, yes, all lives do matter, but we're not focusing on everyone right now.
Right,
We're focusing
yeah.
on people who are still struggling just to get by in society
Right.
because of the racism and classism and sexism and all of the things that our society perpetuates.
Right. Another metaphor that Macklemore talks about in that White Privilege 2 song is if you like go to a neighborhood and one house is on fire, you don't spray all of the houses. You spray the house that's on fire.
Yeah.
Yes, all of the other houses matter,
Yeah.
but the one that's on fire matters a little bit more right now.
Yeah. That's really good.
What it kind of reminds me of is the video on empathy that we watched last week, and how it's
Yeah.
like when you're trying to make someone feel better, you're like, oh, I know this happened to you, but at least this or at least that. But then we don't realize that that's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I
the
have a hard
difference.
time with that. I'm an at leaster.
I am
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is like, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm going to be there with you in that struggle, and I want you to know that, like, I understand that you're hurting, and I want to be there for you, whereas sympathy is like, oh, I know how you feel, like, let's talk about me, you know?
Yeah.
You
So-
want a sandwich? Isn't that what that else said? That little deer or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
One thing that from the Neil poem, I think it's Instructions.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked what you had to say about it, just because when I was listening to it, like, I really liked it, and I enjoyed it, but like I felt like I didn't quite understand like its full meaning.
Yeah.
And like you gave the quote about how like when it was like knocking on the door and like being careful because he was like, if you knock on it, like bite your fingers or something. And then you said like we must be very careful and observant when entering a new world.
Mm.
And I thought that was just like, it made me take a different perspective on the poem.
Yeah.
And so like it just really helped me see it better. So
Oh,
I
good.
really enjoyed that.
Yeah, because when I was reading about fantasy, and my chapter, I don't remember what it's called, but we all read a section from it. It talked about how fantasy helps students think differently and see from another perspective. So I thought that this poem was a way to challenge everything we know as humans. Like, of course, you're going to knock on the door without being careful or thinking twice about it. So it just helps you stop and think and be really observant of everything that's around you, and that's something that we need to be wary of when encountering people of other cultures or going into another country or something. Like, you have to, everything you know is challenged. Like in Mexico, we couldn't put toilet paper in the toilet for a whole month, and it just, these little things people do so differently around the world.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. It reminded me of those books where you pick what's gonna happen next, and then you flip to a page, and then you see what the result of that
I
is.
loved those books when I was
Yeah, just the way that it was worded, I guess, reminded me of that. But then the very end of it, I talked about this a little bit in my discussion post, but it reminded me of The Hobbit when, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the story, but Bilbo Baggins, this little 3-foot hobbit, goes off on this huge adventure with a bunch of dwarves and a wizard, and they go and they kill this dragon that's sitting on this mound of treasures, and there's a huge battle. And the whole time that he's going on this adventure, he's like, I just want to be in my warm bed in my hobbit hole, and I don't want to be uncomfortable, and all this other stuff. And then he goes home and he's like, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. Because then when he was home, his entire world had changed. He didn't know anything about the rest of the world before this trip, and then he'd experienced it, and then he felt who do I share this with? Because in his community, they never left the space where they lived. And so his family actually kind of presumed that he was dead, and so they were selling all of his belongings when he came back. It was really bad. But anyways, it kind of reminded me of that, because at the end it talked about how you come back and I don't know, it's not something's changed, or it said something like that, and it just reminded me of that, and how when you have a lot of different life experiences, it changes you, and it makes every experience after that different because of the way you think. I don't know if that makes sense.
And when you come back, it's way different.
I feel like that kind of was me anyways, coming back from Mexico. One of the girls I know posted in our Facebook group, and she was it was a picture. It was you go through all these experiences with people, and then you come back, and you're supposed to just forget it and do laundry. And, it was kind of I was what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because you are with these girls 24/7.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then you come back, and we see each other in class, but there's been one gathering, and living with people for a whole month is a long time.
Oh yeah.
Me and my roommates, because we didn't walk anywhere alone. Literally, the only time we had alone was going to the bathroom. The only time.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's living in the dorms.
I always think about sometimes I get sad and I wish I could go back and live with my parents and stuff, but now I'm being at this stage in life that I am now, if I went back and lived with my parents, it'd be so different. I'm just thinking about the experiences that I had with my parents before that, and it would be so different if I went back to that now.
And you always remember the best parts of it, and the very first time I went home from college, it was really disorienting. I remember feeling this doesn't feel the same anymore. It's a picture of what it was, but it doesn't feel this
it's
coming home.
Weird.
Yeah, and I talked to my mom about how disjointed I felt, because the place that I called home wasn't really home anymore. It was always going to be my home.
Right.
And obviously you adjust to that over time, and you like get used to going home and just being like, okay, I'm just going to be here for a little bit, and this is the place I grew up, and it's nice to see my family and everything, and yeah, but it's just weird, you know, and like I was saying before, when you're in college, everything changes all the time, like your living situation,
Yeah.
the people you live with, and like the jobs that you have, and the classes you take, and everything's constantly changing, so it's hard to kind of find your footing.
It's kind of an uncomfortable feeling, like going to your parents, and then for me, I'm like, I want to go back to Bellingham because they like it better. and
Yeah.
it's sad.
Yeah.
Like you have your whole new life here.
Yeah.
It's like weird. Yeah. Like I love going to visit my parents. They live in Arizona now. And it's like super fun, but it's like a vacation. It's not like going home, like Bellingham is home now.
I only visited you in Las Vegas, so that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Just so different. That's such a weird thing that like no one prepares you for. And like I wish that there was like somebody there during these times and they could be like, here's the inside scoop, this is how you're gonna feel after
exactly.
this happens.
Because everybody's like, oh, college is so great.
It's the best time
And
in your life.
yeah, like the first night I was here, I was like bawling. It was so bad. I was just like, because my roommate and I didn't get along from the very start, and it was just terrible.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, I want to go home, and I hate like going to college. And then now that I'm here, I'm like, I never want to live at home again. Like I never want to live with my mom again.
So different.
And it's not because I don't love my mom and my sister. It's just that, like, I have gotten so used to being independent and, like, living my own life that when I'm with them, I feel like this, like, responsibility to, like, I don't know, like, be a part of their lives, even though I am. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, there's this weird feeling of, like, I don't really have a place in, like, the immediate family anymore, like, because I'm not there on a regular basis, so I'm not really part of that, but I'm, like, in that sometimes, and it's just so weird.
Yeah. So freaking weird.
Yeah. Well, I think both of our issues dealt with, like, coming of age stories, kind of, right?
What was the other one?
Angel City?
Or oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
That was good.
Oh my gosh. I was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
When the little boy died, I was like,
Yeah.
what? His only friend. And, like, it was kind of foreshadowing when, like, the old man, Joseph, they kept calling him the old man, how he was, like, worried about his son growing up in the world, and, like, how he couldn't protect him when he was out there, and just, like, understanding that, like, fear that especially people of color living in, like, more urban areas have because of the, like, incidents of, like, gang violence and crime and things like that. Like, all these things go on in the streets and you never know, like, what's going to happen. And, like, I feel like I was very sheltered growing up in suburbia and...
We're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, and now every time I get on Facebook, it's like something has happened in my hometown, which I understand, like, people should feel upset about that, but at the same time, it almost feels like this kind of stuff has been happening all around the world, like, in different areas, like in Chicago and Detroit and stuff, and I feel like, I know it's a different scenario, but, like, we were so privileged growing up not going through that, and it's not, I'm not trying to say that it's not bad or anything, but
And one of the questions she asks, how would you discuss grief with your students? And I do not answer.
Oh my gosh. I feel like that even could be a muddy question because everyone experiences grief so differently. And how do you walk your student through that, you
Yeah.
know? Especially if it's the loss of, like, a parent or a sibling, which happens more often than, like, we know.
And death means so many different things in different cultures.
Yeah, it's true.
I think in order to know how to talk about it, you have to understand what their thoughts on it are
Yeah.
first. And because I don't know what kids think about death. I remember
Yeah.
my best friend, she's a gymnastics coach, and she was saying that one of her kids, I think she was like 8 or 9, her cousin died, and she was like, my cousin died. But she just didn't really like say
Emotionally,
anything. Yeah,
kind of, yeah.
and I don't know what the age is where they kind of realize
Yeah.
that death means
Mhm.
people aren't coming back.
Yeah.
I remember when I was 7, my grandpa died, and I remember being really sad and really distraught, but I think that it was more because I should be. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
Or your parents were.
right, like this is a big deal. I see this on TV, so I should be sad. And it's not that I like didn't love my grandpa or anything, but I don't think I fully understood that I was
Yeah.
never gonna see
Yeah.
him again. You know?
Yeah.
I still have a hard time with the concept of death and like what it means to me. And the other thing is, it's not just like cross-cultural. It's like different religions have different beliefs. Like I believe in Buddhism, it's reincarnation. So like your soul comes back as like a different animal or a different person. I may be completely wrong about that.
No,
That's
you're
just
right.
okay. So, in Christianity, like you die, you go to heaven, and you have eternal life in that way. But there's not a point where you're going back down to earth. Like when you die, like that's the end of your physical life. And as someone who was raised in a home that's like Christian or Lutheran, but that's so hard to understand. And I struggle with that every single day. Like I still don't have like a definite like feeling that, oh, when I die, like this is definitely what's going
This
to
is
happen.
for sure the thing.
Yeah, because I don't know. And that's the point, is like we don't know what happens when people die. And that's so scary.
You never know.
Yeah, not knowing is so scary. And, you know, people say that they have come back from the dead and they've had visions and stuff like that, but there are also scientific explanations for that. And so, like, some people hallucinate or they, like, have, like, dreams that are, like, induced by something, or I don't even know how to explain it, but, like, I don't know. It's just, it's so scary to think of, like, just, like, not being anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
ugh.
I always have this vision of like when I die, I'm gonna figure it out and then to come back and like tell everyone.
Yeah.
You'll never know.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's so, I took this like religion class last year, and I studied 4 different types of religion. It's so interesting to learn about what the different religions thought about death, because everybody has their own answer to like what happens after you die. It was so interesting. And I remember I grew up in a Baptist church, and I remember this little girl in like my Sunday school class goes, one day we were talking about death and how after death you have eternal life, and this one little girl was like, yeah, but nobody really knows for sure. And I was like a little girl, I was like, yeah, we all know here, like, this is what really happens. And the girl was like, I mean, you could just die and just, like, be in the dirt for, like, the rest of your life. And we were all like, what?
So
Like,
cynical.
like mind blown.
Yeah.
Like, the thought process. And her parents were the ones teaching the Sunday school class.
Oh my god.
So her parents were like,
Ah!
actually, you really believe, like, we believe this is, like, you have to have faith that this happens. Anyway, and I always think back to that memory that I had as a little kid, because a lot of times, like, as a little kid, you just believe what people tell you. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that sounds accurate.
Yep.
For sure. Like, you just die and go to heaven. For sure.
Unicorns are real, and
Yeah.
like,
But then, like, as you, like, start getting towards like your 20s and
Yeah.
stuff, you're like, what if I do? What if
Yeah.
that little girl was right?
Yeah.
Like, I just am in the dirt for the rest of
Yeah.
my life. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
do you still more?
No.
Yeah.
I hate thinking about it.
Yeah. How do you explain death to children?
Yeah.
I think that's another question that I have is like,
Yeah.
how, like, because we don't know.
Right.
It's like, well, that person isn't, like, here anymore. Like, their
Yeah.
body's here, but, like, their, like, mind and, like, their ability to connect with other people isn't here.
Yeah.
It's really
Just
personal,
weird.
so I almost feel like it's more the families.
Yeah,
ways to
exactly.
do it.
Mhm.
But
Because how do you do it in like an unbiased way?
Yeah, exactly.
Because what you believe could be very different than what
Mhm.
the family believes.
when you have 30 different kids.
Yeah. Like, when the class hamster dies, you don't want to be like, oh, unto hamster heaven. Like, I remember
Right.
that's one of the things that used to console me as a child, but, like, that's not, like, it's kind of, like, proselytizing in a way, I would say, and inflicting your own beliefs on, like, an experience of death.
Yeah, that in itself.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's just so hard.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's not one right answer necessarily, but I think we need to be aware of the fact that there's not one right answer. So,
Yeah. Maybe you could like have a little lesson one day about the different ways that people like cope with grief. You know, like in different areas of the world or something. I don't even know how you would do that.
you could talk about traditions, like in some traditions, I know people, like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, because, like, in standard, like, American Christian tradition, you, like, have a funeral, or you have a memorial service, and everybody's sad, but in other cultures, it's, like, a happy
A
celebration
yeah.
of that person. And I feel like that's a definitely more positive way of, like, dealing with that grief,
Mhm.
is, like, being happy for what that person has given to the world.
Right.
But it's not something that people are necessarily used to, so I don't know.
It's interesting talking to my dad because I just am so scared of death.
Mhm.
And he always says that he wants to spend more time with his dad because he's getting older. But he's also said multiple times, like, if I die, I mean him, my dad,
Mhm.
or if my grandpa dies, he wouldn't be sad because he knows that they have both lived very happy lives
Mhm.
after everything that's happened.
Mhm.
So it's cool to see a different perspective about just knowing that it's natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep having these like really deep experiences to pull off today, but
Mhm.
when my grandma passed away, we were all, have I told you guys this? We were all there, and it was like her decision.
Oh,
Did I tell you
I think
You said like
so.
she said goodbye to everyone.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. She
Yeah.
like brought everybody in and like would tell a story about them, and then she would
Aw.
like fall back asleep, and like it was like she knew like when somebody had gotten there, she would like wake up and be like, oh, so and so, and she would tell a story about them, and we would laugh or whatever, and she would go back to sleep, and then it was like she knew that she had sorry she had said goodbye to like everybody that she needed to, and so she just drifted away.
Yeah.
It was like beautiful,
Yeah.
but and she like made that decision on her own, so it was like easier for us to like cope with that, like because she had made that decision
Yeah.
rather than like somebody else getting sick and like not wanting to die or not being ready to die or whatever. It was like easier for our family to process that.
It's okay. No, that's just like a really deep story. Like, I had to let that sink in. I think it's like hearing stories like that make me happy because like I know a lot of people don't get to say goodbye, and like what a special way to like have a connection with your grandma and remember that, you know? And like every time that I see my great grandma, I basically treat it like the last time I'm going to see her because she is 102.
Yeah.
And it's just like, she's, my mom, because she's a pastor, she'll bring her communion. And she said the last time she was there, she said, "Jesus, take me now." She was just like, I am so done. And she's like, this sounds really bad, but like she's wanted to die for a while because she's like, I have lived a very long life and I have like gone through so many things, and she's dealt with death in so many different ways. Like she had her husband, who is my grandpa's dad, that passed away when, like, a little bit after my parents got married, I think. And then my, her son actually died when he was, like, 6 years old. Yeah. So it's really scary because, like, she still cries about it when she talks about it. Like, how do you, I don't think anyone ever gets over that.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting to see different perspectives on death and how, like, for some people it's a relief, you know, and I feel like that's how my grandma feels because her physical body is just so, it's so old and so worn out that even though she's been like mobile and she's been able to take care of herself the entire time, which is incredible, it's still, you know, like you feel like, okay, I'm done, like I'm good. Like, and it's so hard because every day, like, she deals with pain because she's old. So, and, like, selfishly, I don't want her to die, of course, but I know that she's ready, so it'll make it easier, I guess, when she does, but at least a little bit. So, yeah, and I just feel incredibly blessed to have had her in my life. Like, who gets to say that they have a 102-year-old great-grandma? Like, that's insane. And I realize how, like, special that is and how lucky I am to have that. And so I think that's going back to the whole, like, elderly people thing. Like, that's something that I really learned to appreciate because of my great-grandma and my grandparents. So. Okay.
Can we pull one muddy question? Somehow.
Well, we said, how do you talk to your students about grief? What about death?
Okay.
How do you talk to your students about death?
And that's 1, and then is that a 6 or an 8? That's 8.
Okay.